So the Huddleston case is another example of using 404B to show what the defendant's intent was on this occasion by using the fact that he had a similar intent that the prosecution alleges on this occasion on a prior occasion under a similar set of facts. So if that wasn't abstract enough for you, I'll try to make it a little bit easier. Let's talk about the facts of the case. In Huddleston, the defendant is in the possession and has sold some Memorex tapes that have been stolen. What he claims, though, is he didn't know they were stolen. So the prosecution wishes to introduce evidence that he had previously stolen or that he'd previously sold television sets that were stolen. So in order to show that he knew that these Memorex tapes that he was selling were stolen, the prosecution wants to introduce the fact that he previously sold stolen goods. And they want to say that, on this other occasion, he sold these televisions, they were stolen, and that adds something to its case that he knew on this occasion, and he intended to sell stolen Memorex tapes. In case you're wondering what a Memorex tape is, I thought I'd show you an example here. Here we go. That is a Memorex tape. It's a cassette tape, in case you wonder what those were. These are things that record audio. And I think it's kind of funny that the website that I found that had this is called Retro Style Media. There's so many technological innovations that are coming along that it's hard to believe that everything now seems like that's 10 years old is a retro means of recording something. But that is a Memorex tape. Anyway, so in this case, we're asking how sure does the prosecution have to be that the television sets were stolen in order to use this as evidence that he knew the Memorex tapes were stolen? Because remember, one more time through the chain of inferences, if we're trying to show he knows something is stolen that he's selling on occasion one, the fact that he sold something that was stolen on occasion two adds something under the logic of 404B to the claim that he knew it on the other occasion as well. But how sure do we have to be, A, that he did in fact sell the stolen goods on the first occasion or the second occasion? And then how sure do we have to be that he knew the televisions were stolen? What's the degree of certainty of the other evidence we're using to show his intent on the occasion for which he's on trial? And the court looks at 104B to answer this question. And that's why in the previous tape, I gave you a description and an analysis of 104B. And 104B says it's a very, very low threshold. Go back to that tape if you need to look at that again and read that provision again. It simply says that the threshold is that the jury has to be able to find that this other event is true, that it actually happened, in order for it to be admissible under 104B. So the court says there's a really low threshold. Well, the defendant's argument is, wait a second, this is something different. This is character evidence you're letting in. 404B is allowing character evidence to come in, so you should be more restrictive of this character evidence because of all the stuff that 404A says, all the stuff 404B1 says, that we don't allow the past to come in to explain the future. We don't want a defendant's character being used to lead to his conviction. In light of all of that, we ought to be really, really sure that those TVs were stolen, and he knew they were stolen before we say that tells us something about his possession of the tapes. And the court says, oh, no, look at 104B. That's the standard for the certainty that's required of evidence before a jury gets to hear it. And if there's any kind of concern about character, and any kind of concern about prejudice coming in from character evidence, that's an issue for 403. And if you'll recall, 403 says that any probative evidence has to be outweighed has to be substantially outweighed by the threat of prejudicial impact before that evidence is going to be thrown out. So 403 creates a really, really high threshold or really high presumption of admissibility, high threshold for exclusion. 403 is not going to throw many things out. And so what the court is saying then in Huddleston is that we don't really have to be all that sure that the defendant committed other bad acts that might bear on his intent on this particular occasion. That, you know, if it could have happened that he stole televisions, if it could have happened that Beecham was in possession of a credit card, we don't even have to know that he did possess the credit card to bring that in his silver dollar theft prosecution. We just have to think that a jury could find that he was in possession of those credit cards. There's a very low threshold under 404B for how certain we have to be that these other acts that are going to help explain the acts for which the defendant's on trial have occurred. Very low threshold. We don't have to show with any degree of certainty, just that those things could have happened, that a reasonable jury could have found that those other acts happened. So as I said earlier, that we have this strange dichotomy. 404A and 404B1 both really rail against the idea of character evidence. And then we simply define certain circumstances in which the categories of character, which are a whole lot of them, intent, knowledge, things that go to show intent, knowledge, modus operandi, absence of mistake, these types of things. If you're bringing the character evidence in, the prior bad acts in to show one of those purposes, then it comes in, and it comes in just as readily as every other piece of evidence that we allege is relevant. That it's almost a wide open door for this evidence if you can show it fits one of those categories.